Well, here we are again, as predicted. Pearl and Andy Lockwood back for yet another predictions webinar. Hello, Pearl.
Hello, Andy.
Or should I say Madam Pearl?
Yes.
And soothsaying Andy. No, we haven't gotten tired of this joke, and we haven't gotten tired of making predictions, particularly because no one seems to track the ones we made last year. What does your crystal ball say, Pearl? Anything coming in yet?
I see many good things, and
Needs to be washed.
yeah, I think I have to wash this bowl. All right, I see a shower in your future.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to ignore my magic 8-ball. I'm trying to get ChatGBT to write something funny, but so far AI hasn't invaded the paranormal world, as far as I know.
Oh.
All right. So welcome. First of all, let us know you can see and hear us, especially our hats. We had some budget cuts. Costumes changed a little bit this year, mostly because last week I couldn't find them in a panic. So we splurged on Amazon. And we're back. And what's going to be happening tonight is we're going to issue our bold, fearless predictions for this coming year. So this is really aimed at people who are sending kids to college in the next couple of years, meaning specifically high school class of 2024, 25, 26. There's a lot of stuff swirling around right now, which we could probably say every year, but this year seems to be an even more interesting year in terms of the factors and the headwinds and tea leaves and bones and whatever we're supposed to be looking at. Some of this, I just want to warn you that, some of the stuff you're going to listen to tonight, you'll think, okay, that kind of makes sense. That's obvious. I guess I could have thought that. There'll be some other types of things that come out that you may haven't thought about. And time will tell if they are true or not. Pearl has come up with, you said 7?
Yes, with some subsets and yes, in and around 7.
Okay, I'm going to call that 7. I have 10. So I thought what we do is you would go through your list first, and I'll make some, hopefully substantive comments, and then I will go through mine. Now, what is the source other than the ether? What is the source of your predictions? Do you care to disclose them?
Multiple. I didn't know that I had to footnote. I didn't know this was going to be like a book report.
I recently.
Is this part of the joke, or
no? I recently came into possession of some information that I thought that we could share. So as long as nobody's wearing a wire.
Did you get this out by the garage?
This was by the closet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where we keep the kids' costumes from preschool?
where we keep the midlife crisis car. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the only joke I prepared for tonight. So it's only going to go uphill from here. So, all right. So who's with us? Just let us know in chat. You can see in here. Hello, Gary. Likes a good footnote joke.
Who doesn't?
True attorney. He's such a lawyer. Crystal, Irene from Brooklyn, Stu from Syracuse, Sabera, Chris. All right, good. So we're coming in loud and clear, I can tell. Virginia, great lids from John Masterwick. Thank you. Pam from Long Island, from Syosset. All right, good. All right, we're getting encouragement. Because, look, you should really be hanging on every word, because what says credibility on the internet, like to college advisors wearing funny hats? We're probably the 2 most credible college psychics on the internet. All right, enough. Pearl, go ahead with prediction number 1.
Okay, prediction number 1. To probably no one's surprise, after the experience with what education had to turn to during the COVID epidemic, is there will likely continue to be an increase in online education, providing education at the higher level through the online means. Why? for a number of reasons. It obviously it provides greater deliverables and greater ability for schools to charge and bring more paying
Scale.
customers under their tent. Exactly, scale. It enables these institutions, many of whom are financially struggling. Some of the smaller liberal arts schools continue to struggle. Schools that had trouble filling seats before the pandemic certainly are having greater troubles now. Many, I'm almost going into yet another trend.
Well, may I jump in?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So a lot of colleges have received very strong blowback about their online programs.
Mhm.
A, from parents like, why are we paying for this? B, because they're not as engaging.
Mhm.
So colleges definitely want to cut costs because they are businesses.
Yeah.
But there's also big investment that needs to be made. It's not just, putting on a hat and get in front of a Zoom or equivalent. So that'll be an interesting one to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and that brings me to another trend.
Is prediction number 2?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes.
What is it with you?
I'm feeling
You're
a little
usually
reined in by your enumerating. I just want to share.
Okay, you're like the numbers person in our firm, so that's disturbing.
That's true.
You are unpredictable.
Another trend, as I touched on.
Will we be in a fight after this webinar?
Decidedly is a continued consolidation of institutions that are struggling. So we've seen trending that way, that some schools have banded together. Instead of closing shop, they have merged and either joined names, joined forces, or one kind of takes over the other. I expect a continued trend in that direction.
May I comment?
Yes, sure.
So what's been interesting to me is that we predicted this last couple of years, and it's been kind of few and far between. I thought there'd be more of these types of, going out of business or consolidations, but they definitely are happening, but just maybe not as rapidly as we would have thought.
Mm-hmm. And
back to you, Pearl.
Okay. To circle back to your comment about how the traditional college-bound student and their parents may be showing some blowback to the online education platform.
Yeah, every time you turn to me, the thing in your head blinds me. It's so shiny. Is it like a third eye?
It is. It's my third eye.
It's so creepy.
Is that we're likely to see an increase in adult learners in the college marketplace. Part of this is due to a tremendous skills gap rate in the workplace. There are full-time employees that are wearing many, many hats: parents, caregivers, retirees,
psychics, psychic hats.
Many of those who have once been traditionally educated, who have now found them needing to either reskill or upskill in order to compete in the workforce. So schools are seeing, especially with now the provision of online learning, a format through which many adult learners can avail themselves now of higher education to make them more marketable. We'll see an increase in the adult learners to perhaps stave off some of that blowback you mentioned.
My comment is I'm fixated on the word upskill. Is that a real word?
Upskill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a real word?
Yeah.
Wow. That's like a new.
Maybe it's a trending word of 23 and beyond.
I think I'm way down skill.
Okay, so yet another trend, and again, I don't really, because I know that you're going to probably go deep on this, so I'm only going to mention it.
Tell me what I'm going to do, unless you're predicting it.
I'm predicting, and this is not such a wild prediction, because we know that the Supreme Court is going to come down one way or the other in some kind of decision on the race-conscious admissions. And then, of course, whichever way that's going to be, we'll expect some fallout. However, that should be decided. And I'll wait till you have more to say on that a bit later, I think.
That was not a prediction.
Well, that there's going to be a decision made as to whether schools like Harvard can continue to use race as a factor in its admissions decision.
This spring,
expressly and overtly, we will hear.
This spring, the Supreme Court will issue decisions In other news, the sun.
Including this.
In
though,
other news, the
including
sun will come up tomorrow.
Okay.
Take a stand. What's your prediction? Or are you going to leave it for me because you want me to take the heat?
Yeah, that's always easier.
That is the subject of my first prediction of
Is
my
it?
10.
I had a feeling.
You predicted that?
I had a feeling it was
am I
going to
that
be the
predictable?
mainstay of your
All right, go ahead.
predictions. Okay. Prediction number, I'm not really sure because I don't want to be confined by
I think this is
enumeration.
number 2.
All right. The use of virtual reality for education.
What?
Yes. The use of virtual reality has been found to increase engagement with students. And of course, we're dealing with a population of students that is being brought up on engaging with virtual reality. And schools have found that it provides more of a contextualized learning, a deeper understanding, especially in the sciences. And apparently through virtual reality technology, there is an impact of enormous lasting learning, apparently. So I expect to see more of that down the road. And of course, overall, this may fall under a greater penumbra of increased technology altogether in higher education.
So when you say virtual reality, the way I think about virtual reality is that
you're in a thing, an Oculus.
Is that college is not the real world. So that's basically 4 years or 6 years of virtual reality. Is that not what you mean?
That's actually funny. And no, but I certainly, now that you're saying that, have a double meaning because that's certainly true. That's funny.
Okay.
I like that. Okay. And another trend that we will continue to see as schools across all levels, high schools and colleges, are becoming much more aware or putting into central focus the notion of catering somewhat to non-traditional learners. For example, there are a lot of students with accommodations of all sorts, a lot of students who have difficulty with executive functioning, for example. So some schools have opted for a trimester, not so much the trimester learning, but only allowing students to take 3 classes at a time in a trimester or a semester so that they can, wholly focus their attentions and have a deeper, instead of just racing through and getting my, 5 classes out of the way and having a more cursory experience, or perhaps just a scattered sense of learning. Some schools are now, and I expect this to be more of a trend, catering toward, how do we reach everybody, not just, our best and our brightest or our traditional learners. So
I was very Fiddler on the Roof of you.
Really? Hysterical. Okay. Let's see what else.
Yeah, let's see.
Let's see what else I got in my little goodie bag here. Artificial intelligence. Dun, dun, dun. Now, this has many little parts here. I know that I'm not going where you went, but you had discussed there are all kinds of uses of artificial intelligence. Of course, there are some of the more nefarious notions of artificial intelligence that have been discussed in the news, like, using chat
GBT.
Yeah. That literally you can give it instructions and say, I want you to write me a 500-word essay about daffodils in Zimbabwe and how they grow and how they irrigate, and you'll get it.
I can't
3 minutes later.
I can't believe you stole my example.
I'm sorry. So there's that, and there's that fear, and how is higher education at all levels going to be able to discern, is the author Chat AI, or is the author this enrolled student? More on that later from Andy. But in a more positive vein, artificial intelligence I expect to be used to teach perhaps more efficiently. It should lighten the load of burdened TAs and professors, perhaps there'll be more uniformity in teaching, so that if you get stuck with the organic chem teacher that stinks, you're not going to, have a dashed medical school bound career.
Well, not at NYU.
Yeah. But anyway,
they got rid
it's
of their organic chemistry professor.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Because he was, grading too harshly.
The one who wrote textbooks,
Right.
Right. At Stanford or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But although I mentioned the increased use of artificial intelligence, it will be somewhat slow to be integrated on a mass level because it is a bit expensive for now. But we'll see as the technology grows, it may become more cost efficient.
Well, especially because Microsoft and other companies are putting literally billions of dollars into it, to make it better and more accessible.
Sort of like when computers, it was a few and far between, and cell phones, and as we've all seen and continue to see in our history.
Fax machines.
Okay. Yeah, that too. Next trend.
Number 2.5.
Whatever I'm up to.
Gotta hydrate. It's good.
There is going to be a greater demand and greater connection between the curriculum and the skills needed in the workplace.
God, I hope so.
God, I hope so too. I can't exactly. I hope this is a trend, and I can't decipher whether I really just hope this to be so. And I'm trying to put it out there in the universe.
Well, some schools are better at it than others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and as there are greater skills gaps out there because there are such advances now in robotics and AI, and humans are a little more vulnerable for their value, or the value they'll bring in the job place. Colleges are aware, as of course they have to justify their ever increasing tuitions. They're going to have to start making their students a bit more marketable and proving a little bit more of the return on the investment in that way. And to close out my predictions, also, this should not come as a big surprise, especially from what we've learned, unfortunately, the mental health fallout of the COVID pandemic. There is an increase in mental health awareness worldwide, college-wide. COVID, of course, helped bring this into the forefront. Institutions are proactively dealing with this by sharing mental health awareness, having workshops on it with the students during their their initial time on campus, during their orientation sessions. For example, Drexel University, they offer free mental health screenings to encourage all students to monitor their mental health status and counter the stigma head on. They use the slogan, "Get a checkup from the neck up," which I thought was really cool.
That's catchy.
Yeah. So now I'm going to turn it over to the Swami to my right.
All right, so I have some predictions. Pearl, could you just stash this information? I don't care where you put it. Anywhere. Garage. All right. So I'll just go through the predictions. I'll wait for you to comment, and then anyone, feel free to lob in comments into the chat also.
Yes, and I'm going to be collecting. I see there are some questions in chat. I'll be gathering them. We'll circle back to them at the end. So if you see your questions disappear, I'm collecting them.
So one prediction I thought for sure, meaning I mispredicted, that you were going to issue was, so I'm just going to say it now. So now I have 11. Is that the FAFSA is changing. There's all these changes to the financial aid applications coming up, and
well, that's
FAFSA
not
is
a prediction. I know that to be so.
Yeah, well, you thought that last year, and what happened?
It didn't happen this year.
So
right, that's
so
right.
both main financial aid applications apparently are going to change either a little bit or a lot. Mm-hmm. We still don't know, but the process is extremely complicated. That's why they're trying to streamline it. But just like any bureaucrat would do, they're mucking it up even more, as far as I could tell. So like the old expected family contribution, EFC, is going to change to the student aid index, SAI, but it's not really going to change that much except in certain areas. So there's a lot of financial aid changes coming down the pike for the 24-25 year, which is what we're heading into.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not touching on that just now. Those points.
Well, I believe these are my predictions, but if you have
Oh.
something to add, by all means.
I wasn't going down that road, but if I can circle back to it later, go ahead.
It's such a cliffhanger. This is like watching Yellowstone with you. Like, we never know what's going to happen next.
Any Yellowstone fans out there?
Except we know someone's going to get the crap beaten out of them and have scars in their faces because there's like a fist fight or something, like, every 10 minutes. It's like Lethal Weapon. There's a car crash or a fight every 3 minutes. All right. So, old prediction number one, getting back to the whole thing about race. So there was a Supreme Court case pending, decision expected this spring when they issue all their decisions. And this has to do with two cases really seen as one against Harvard, one against the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, basically about whether and how much you can use race as an element or condition for college admissions. So it looks pretty clear that the Supreme Court is either going to eliminate that, which I'm not predicting, or severely cut back on colleges' ability to do that. So the question is, well, what does that mean for us, whether you are one of these underrepresented minorities or the way I like to describe it, if you are visually diverse, because it's not just people that we know and see in our practice, but we know of so many people who fall into a certain underrepresented minority status or characterization, but their families are millionaires or even more, but they still have an edge in college admissions because they are visually diverse. So what I am betting will happen is once the Supreme Court either limits or possibly eliminates race as a factor that can be considered, then what will happen is colleges will shift to other types of, or emphasize other features such as income, maybe favoring low income families, because that does not necessarily correlate with race. So that's my guess. It's kind of what I hope, just to show my cards here. I do also see that most colleges, particularly the elite Ivies, are de-emphasizing the importance of legacy status. We've seen that over the years, both personally in our family. 2 years ago, not this year,
Yeah,
and we and our clients. But many colleges, not all, many colleges have already started to announce that they are no longer factoring in whether a student is a son or a daughter of a alum of that school. Okay. All right. Next prediction. Do you have any comments?
I'll make them when I have them.
All right. I actually didn't write this down. I just thought of this. It has to do with college admissions. There will be more pronouns and more opportunities on the Common Application that have to do with how you identify, not necessarily what you look like to people.
That's actually true now this year for the first time on the FAFSA. For the first time at the end of all the substantive financial information, there are 4 questions about how you identify. Which
they, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they say these are voluntary.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect your eligibility for money. We're cynical and suspicious. I don't.
But there is a decline not to answer option.
The Common Application, there's boxes. Check this box if you're American Indian. Check this box if you're whatever. And then either the next question or 2 questions down, it says regardless of how you answered that previous question, how do you identify? So we're at the point now where there's like 28 pronouns, and I don't even know what things are going to look like. But maybe the Common Application is going to be longer in the pronoun section next year.
Maybe.
Okay. Okay. More on admissions. I think that there will be not necessarily at the Ivy and elite schools, but at all the other schools out of the top 15, 20 schools, there will be more of an emphasis on admitting full pay students, people who can foot the bill. They don't necessarily come up with all the money, but they're people who don't qualify for need-based aid. So they can either get the money by writing a check or they can get the money by borrowing, but they're not need-based eligible. The reason for that prediction is because this past year, I'm starting to hear how some of the smaller schools, not the elite ones, but the smaller schools, their endowment returns were way down and they need money. And they get money by 2 ways. One, tuition, two, by fundraising through their alumni base. And the smaller schools and the less elite schools don't typically have the most active and affluent alumni bases. Typically, that's a broad sweeping statement. It's not true across the board. That's that prediction. Pearl, you have anything, or are you posting on social?
I am not posting on social.
Okay. You on TikTok again? Oh.
Yes.
I predict that TikTok will be not
Outlawed?
allowed. Yeah, it will not be allowed in most colleges next year.
Yeah.
Some schools are already starting to do that, and that's on the fly, that presentation, because I guess you're not on TikTok.
No.
Are you doing something work related? Do I have to take
I am doing work related.
Do you have to take that away from you?
No.
Okay. Are we going to be in a fight after this webinar? Most assuredly, Yahtzee. Okay. I had the same prediction about some mergers and some shutdowns. That seems to be happening, but slowly. Test optional prediction. It's still a thing. Still going to be a thing. But we've seen a small trend, a small trickle of a hint of a scintilla of a trend. Schools like Georgetown, MIT, the University of Florida schools, some other colleges that are still requiring those scores. So I think it's going to be a slow trickle of more schools that are not allowing test optional submissions. And that actually ties into my artificial intelligence prediction, which I'm going to get to in a moment after traffic and weather. Did you have a comment on the test optional?
Well, I always feel responsible to our listeners just to throw in one more comment about the test optional notion. It's important, just as a piece of advice, if you are looking at a test optional school, if your student's score falls within the range of that school's average and you don't submit those scores, the presumption is that you did not even reach that minimum number of their range.
Yeah, and the way I say it is,
I just want you to understand that.
The way I say it is, the presumption is not that you scored too high and you don't want to show off,
right? Or even in range. So right. I just feel
I got some predictions to get through here, Pearl. You're teaching. You're
well. That's an important.
You're genuine.
It's an important one.
You're big hearted. Right. You're a great gypsy.
Thank you.
Can I say that? Did that just offend somebody?
I don't know. You probably
are we offending gypsies?
It's unintentional.
Any gypsies on the webinar or podcast? This will be a podcast episode. I apologize. Midway, not in advance, not in retrospect. Midway through. Okay, prediction number. Well, it was 5. Now it's really 7. What's going to happen with college prices in today's turbulent times, with layoffs being announced? Tens of thousands of layoffs being announced almost every week by big companies. And are we in an inflation? Are we not in an inflationary period? Recession? Who knows? Okay.
When's this bubble gonna burst?
One thing. Thank you. One thing I can promise and predict wholeheartedly: college prices are going to continue to increase no matter what happens in the economy, because they always do. That is why. Yeah. Now, it's not all bad news, because almost in lockstep with price increases, you'll see colleges discounting even more than the previous year. So it's really a two-pronged prediction: higher prices, but higher discounting. Every year that the National Association of Collegiate Business Officers, who are not psychic, as far as I know, have published information about tuition discounting, it's risen every year. So this past year, 2022, I believe the average discount rate at private colleges is 54.5%, more than half off. And nationally, for private and public, it's roughly 50%. So that means two things. One is that you shouldn't look at sticker price only, right? And two, paying full price is an option. It is not an obligation.
That's true.
Yeah. So that, I feel good about that prediction. Maybe the only one. Questions?
Yeah,
comments?
no comment. So one of the things I had come across in my research, did not bring it up as a trend. However, in line with there being less credit for legacy, and there being an increase in the generosity or the discounting that some of the more affluent schools are. Part of that is going to come from an increased fundraising, not from the individual donor, like a legacy, but macro donations from major corporations. That is also expected as a trend.
Macaroni?
No, not macaroni, on a bigger level.
Oh, macro.
Sorry.
Wow, this is like Yellowstone. Yeah, I mean, there's some schools that are far and away the kings of doing that, and I'm thinking specifically about High Point University, which is basically like if Disney did college, it would be High Point, and everything, all the money that the president Nito Cobain raised, which was initially $700 million, and since then I think he's tripled that. A lot of that has come from donations from like Coca-Cola and other Fortune 500 companies. And that's a model that I think a lot of the elite schools are extremely reluctant to embrace, at least publicly, but privately, stuff like that happens a lot more than people would think. All right, let me talk more now about the artificial intelligence stuff, the ChatGBT, which I think the best way that I've seen it explained is it's almost like a calculator, so in a sense. So when you're taking an SAT math test, you've got a calculator section and a non-calculator section, right? So think of ChatGPT or whatever artificial intelligence program comes out as being like that. My prediction is that colleges will, in terms of admissions, they will have certain types of submissions that they require that can be used by ChatGPT or equivalent, but they'll also have other ways of evaluating whether a student can think clearly or write clearly and all that. So one way that I've seen discussed already is going back to more interviewing, which I don't think is going to happen. That's my prediction because admissions officers are pretty overwhelmed. Another idea that I saw bandied about has to do with on the SAT or the ACT writing section. So the SAT just got rid of the writing section. The ACT so far has not, but writing a response under time pressure might be a way to give colleges that information that they are fearful they're not going to get about a student's ability to think clearly and write clearly by using artificial intelligence. I'm not so sure about that because we've seen a lot of test optional colleges. So if they're not requiring the SAT or the ACT for admission, I'm not sure what they're going to do to require writing. What I do think is most likely is, and I've seen a few colleges do this every year, is ask kids to submit graded papers that from their high school careers that with the teacher's comments that will demonstrate to these admissions officers almost real time how kids write and what they're capable of in terms of critical thinking and all that type of stuff that they look for. So that is that's probably my if I were leaning one way, that would be it would be in that direction. Now, another thing I've seen that I think is interesting, and I was just talking to our daughter Sammy today, who's a senior, and she was preparing for what was it? It was an oral presentation she had to give.
Yeah.
And she's done theater her whole life and all that. And I said, something, when you get to college next year, this could be a real advantage for you because there's a lot of talk about instead of relying on ChatGPT or accepting papers written by ChatGPT, going back to some oral examination or oral presentations in college because of that. So she didn't like that at all. But we'll see if that happens. But that actually makes a lot of sense to me. So that could happen. That's not really a college admissions prediction. It's a once you're in college prediction. But
yeah,
we'll see.
It certainly makes sense, that notion, to combat the, how do you evaluate someone's math skills when they have a calculator? It definitely addresses that if they're going to have to, not have access to their computer when they're delivering the information. They have to show that somehow maybe you can use ChatGPT or whatever to, what is it?
Yeah.
I'm saying it right? Okay.
I get it wrong a lot.
To learn the information. They're with open book tests, you're like, what are they going to learn with an open book test? But they're still having the process of getting the information in between the ears in some way, maybe less so with ChatGPT, but if they're going to have to memorize it and then deliver it, they'll have to show some retention. I agree. They're going to have to address it in some way.
Yeah, a lot of professors are up in arms about it. I think a lot of them feel threatened that their jobs, might be
They should.
impacted, and frankly, some of the sample college essays that I saw generated by again ChatGPT, which by the time we publish this podcast, there could be a totally new, could be like MySpace,
Right,
something that
right.
everyone used and then left.
Exactly.
But they were pretty good, right? And when you consider an admissions officer who reads 1,000 applications each year, some of them a lot more. I was texting back and forth with Nick, who is an admissions officer at Manhattan College, and he's worked for us for a couple of years. He just got finished reading applications, and I think it was like 2,500 applications that he personally reviewed this year. So they don't have a lot of time, and these artificial intelligence programs can do a pretty good job. And I know there's the Zero GPT, which is a program that's designed to root out use of ChatGPT, right. But that's there's so many ways to get around that already, and there'll always be ways to get around it. So it's here to stay, whatever it's called. And the question is how do you deal with it? And I think having oral presentations in college is definitely one way, and showing actual work that you've done with comments and revisions. It's probably the other way for admissions purposes. All right, next prediction. Do you know what a chief experience officer is?
A chief experience officer?
A CXO?
No.
Yeah, I don't know what the F that is either, but many colleges are adding the people with those titles, along with the diversity, equity, inclusiveness officers. And so my prediction is there's going to be more and more administrative bloat. This is another reason why colleges charge so much. It's not because they're paying their teachers a lot more. It's because of all the admin. So the chief experience officer is a trend. I've seen multiple references to that as an administrative position in the last couple of weeks. And I still don't really know what that is. I don't think colleges know what that is either, but they're hiring people and they're paying them like $200,000 or more to do that. So remind me to put an ad on Indeed for a Lockwood College Prep Chief Experience Officer, and then I'm going to hire you.
Sounds great.
If you have references.
I'll provide them. I'll have ChatGPT provide them.
Very good. Just fabricate it. So the other funny thing that we were talking about so our daughter Sammy's presentation today was on The Great Gatsby, and she's contrasting that with the Jordan Peele movie and talking about how, all the Gatsby made up all this stuff. And I was like, it kind of sounds like you could tie a lot of this into the whole George Santos thing. And she's like, no, we're not supposed to do that. And so I was pressuring her to do that, because this is the guy who reinvented this whole past. But people do that on college applications, right? Lori Loughlin, Felicity Huffman, Rick Singer, who just sentenced about a month ago, 3.5 years. I predict he'll be out in like a year.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. But I don't think there's going to be much of a change in terms of fabrications of college applications. That's another prediction I'm making on the fly, because it's basically the honor code. Like if you submit an application, it doesn't get reviewed by your guidance counselor unless you give them access to your common application. Most people just assume that's not the case. And I admit, I was surprised when I found that out from Don Betterton, who is a business partner of ours who was on the admissions committee of Princeton for 30 years. And when I talked to him during the scandal 3 years ago, he said, I'm surprised this doesn't happen more. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's going to continue. Fake and exaggerated college resumes. Sorry to be cynical. Next presentation. Next. What are we doing? Next prediction.
Yes.
Vaccine policies. The controversial third rail for college advisor, vaccine policies. Even though there seems to be some what I would call common sense starting to trickle out about how much we got wrong about the pandemic, meaning more mainstream news sites talking about how we overcounted, confusing people who died from COVID instead of with COVID,
right?
And things like that. I am hopeful that some of these vaccine policies are going to be relaxed a little bit for people who certainly have had COVID and have the antibodies that are stronger than anything a vaccine could come up with. And as we learn that the real mortality rate is like the flu, like, less than 1%. I'm hopeful that some colleges will slowly back off on their vaccination mandates, but it's going to be a minority of schools. So the way to get around the vaccine mandate is going to still be for religious purposes. I can't take the vaccination because my religion doesn't allow it. So the prediction there is that there's going to be a growing cottage industry of rent-a-priests and rent-a-rabbis who are going to write these notes and document these religious exceptions. Pearl?
Probably.
All right. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. We are vaccinated. I'm just saying. But the common sense, that's what I'm confused by. Yeah, hoping for and confused by. All right. Off the third rail. Back to my next,
safer spaces.
My second to last prediction, which is college rank. Bunch of colleges have, medical schools and a couple of law schools have backed off and withdrew from college rankings with U.S. News and World Report because of the flaws that everyone talks about. And when I say a bunch, it's a relatively small number and mostly elite colleges that are now, refusing to provide data that for the most part is publicly available anyway, in some sort of faux protest to the accuracy or inaccuracy, I should say, of these rankings. My prediction is that the U.S. News and World Report rankings are still going to be the most popular publication that magazine puts out. In fact, it's the only one. Everything else is online, but that's the one that they do in print. And I think they're still going to be viewed as the Bible by most parents and applicants, and frankly, most of the colleges. It's still going to matter, just notwithstanding the Johnny-come-lately objections to the college rankings. Pearl, your comments.
And if I have them, I'll make them.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Well, that's nice.
Yes.
We're still on the air? All right.
Yeah.
I do that sometimes. Okay. My
sometimes less is more.
Certainly with body mass.
Yeah.
You look great. I'm talking about my own.
Great.
Not looking good for the kid. Last one. Families and kids are still going to make a lot of self-inflicted mistakes, a lot of self-inflicted wounds in this process. Some mistakes are by commission, for example, and I'm not taking anything away from people who have mental health issues or anything you predicted about mental health issues, but if I only have, I take on 24 clients a year per graduating class. If I'm getting sick of reading essay drafts about mental health problems, just imagine what poor Nick, who read 2,500 applications last year, feels like. There are things to write about and things not to write about. One of the ways to figure this out is by thinking about, what does my audience want? Not what do I want to write about? What does my audience want to learn about me? So that's a mistake of commission, writing about the wrong stuff. Then there's mistakes of omission, such as not learning legal and ethical loopholes to qualify for more aid. Not starting early enough. There was a recent, like 2 days ago, that New York Times article that Mitch sent, a guy I play golf with, and it was I guess it was a feature or study group or focus group, I should say, of like 14, mostly I think high school seniors, class of 2023, and asked them all sorts of questions about, how much does it matter whether you go to prestigious college? You're going to be happier if you go to prestigious college. What are you trying to get out of college? And one of the questions was, what advice would you give to younger kids? And literally all of them said, start earlier, get organized. Don't wait till it's too late. Don't rush through this. You're going to put even more stress and anxiety on you. And that is probably the biggest mistake that people make, is starting too late. Maybe in that, the stars haven't aligned, which we would know about from our astrological stuff. But what I can tell you is the sooner you start thinking about this stuff and planning, the better your results will be. And that's sort of, axiomatic for like anything you do in life, but particularly with college. The college timeline is like a train schedule. It comes in at Penn Station or New Madison Street, Penn Station, and it leaves, when it leaves. And either you're on that train or you're not on that train. So the earlier you start thinking about this stuff and how to plan, and how to pay for college, and how to improve your extracurricular activities so they stand out in this sea of sameness, where everyone is a member of honor society. 70% of kids at any given high school are in that participation trophy honor society. That's not going to get you into college today. So I say this all the time. I just actually said this to our daughter Sammy last week. She got into her early decision school. She was really psyched, and her grades were very good, but she's not valedictorian. Her scores are very good, but they weren't perfect. But she had a 6-page resume that was just loaded with all kinds of stuff that showed initiative and leadership and all that. So that's an argument, and we never coached her on that either. She just organically did that. She's that type of kid. She's also the youngest of 4. We're not only college advisors; we're also clients, right? Like the hair club for men, like Cy Sperling. So next year we'll have 3 kids in college. So I'm telling you about this personally as well as professionally. So if you are interested in talking to us about potentially working together, about exploring whether we're a good fit, for people on this webinar only who've sat through our goofy predictions and costumes and non-politically correct screeds or opinions, what I'm happy to do is, instead of charging the customary $749 consultation, you can speak to us for free. It's a college strategy session. It's a call or a Zoom meeting. It's 20 minutes. The purpose of it is to explore working together. You can ask any questions that you want about our programs. I will tell you very candidly whether I think you're a good fit or if you're not a good fit. That includes talking about pricing. I'll just quick note on that right now. Currently, we have 2 different services. We have the financial aid consulting service, and we have the comprehensive college advisory service, which includes financial aid. And there's a subset. There's either working with me if you want to be one of my 24 people, or working with one of my associates who I supervise, but they do the day-to-day. So there's a very wide range of fees, and we're not cheap. We charge, I would say, in an amount that's commensurate with the value that we give. So in other words, if someone works with Pearl for the financial aid only, which is $3,500, they'll get back far more than that. And if they work with me, and they start with us in 11th grade, and my current prices are $20,000 for someone in 11th grade, and those spots will be gone possibly in the next 30 days, then they will get back far more than that in terms of the value that we provide. That's how we built our business. But we're not right for everyone. A, we're not a cut rate shop, but B, we're not good with, I'm certainly not good with kids who aren't going to do the work, who aren't coachable, who are entitled, who are looking to, be chased around, don't recognize that this is a process for them to help them grow up. And neither of us is good with parents who, think they know better, or they have trouble taking responsibility. If Pearl, we just had this morning, if Pearl sends a request, hey, I need these 3 bits of information to complete your financial aid applications, and they get back 1 and the other 2 are ignored, and that's not someone that we want to work with either. Okay, so I don't mean to be negative. I'm just getting that on the table, putting the skunk on the table, as my late great friend Neil used to say. Oh. So, all right, so that's it. So if you're interested, you can just click on that. I think it's blue button, might be green, and that'll take you right to an application. Very quick to fill out, give us some information, and then you can get on my calendar. And that is free. There's no charge if you book this and you saw this webinar. All right, any questions?
Yes, there are some questions. Okay. All right, question from David. What schools are hot? What schools are not? Trending up, trending down. Yeah. I
told you to do that one.
I did that. I actually have a couple of hot schools to mention. University of Georgia continues to be a hot school on the rise. I could tell you 10 years ago, I never saw it on anyone's list. I started to see it a couple years back, and increasingly so in increasing numbers each year, of course, due to their football prowess in part.
And what is that called?
Winning.
The term in college admissions is the Flutie effect.
Oh, the Flutie effect.
For all you
I knew
sports
that, I
fans
knew
out
that.
there.
Yeah. Okay. Another hot school is SMU, Southern Methodist University in Texas.
The Mustangs, of course.
Maybe you can share why, but all of a sudden it was on everyone's list this year.
Yeah, it's hot because it's hot.
Because it's hot.
No, I think I don't know. Maybe our clients are skewing a certain way. I mean, I think that's
Maybe.
sort of an affluent, Texas school might be not as woke as some of the other ones. But yeah, I was surprised to see that this year too.
And Butler also continues to be
Interesting
on people's lists, kind of new. And then there are the. Well, I'm not really sure so many falling out of favor.
Well, Pearl, you had homework.
I know. I came up with my hot schools, not my not schools. And then there are, of course, schools that continue to be trendy and hot, like Villanova, like Boston College, like Michigan, like Miami. These are schools that NYU pervade everyone's lists.
I would say that in terms of the knots, the one I've noticed where I don't know if I've seen a drop of applications, but certainly in kids we see going there, I see a lot of kids thinking about Elon and then they don't go. And I'm not really sure why, other than my speculation is that number one, their acceptance rate has gone way up. So I think a lot of people are not, who are applying there are not going. And number two, they stopped giving as much money as they used to. And another school I would say that is in the same category of that is Providence College. I still think they're getting plenty of applications, but they're not giving out as much money as they used to. And that kind of ties into the other part that I don't know if anyone was asking about this, but I wanted to also to talk about which schools are likely to be very generous and which are likely to be stingy, which is also a Pearl question. Not really, but so generally speaking, the schools that are the most generous are the private schools. So even though Elon and Providence are private schools, they are not particularly generous. Same thing with NYU. But on the other hand, most other private schools are, because they have the endowment. They have the money to be able to give out. So even though the sticker price might be $70,000, $80,000, the average, again, I said this before, the average private school discount is 54.5%. So private schools in general are the ones that have the most money, whereas state schools don't have any money. They have most of their funding come from their own state governments, and for the most part, every state in the union, other than the ones where everyone's moving there, like Texas and Florida, but pretty much every state in the union is singing the blues and crying about not having enough funding. So the state universities in your state or out of your state tend to be the most stingy and miserly colleges.
Question from Stacy: were there as many applications this year as last year?
So far it's still early, right? Because they haven't been tabulated.
Right.
But so far, applications, I read somewhere that applications are up 20% compared to last year, which is nuts. There aren't more applicants applying; there are more applications going in because people are applying to more colleges, and the subset of kids who are applying to more colleges per student are in the affluent areas, like in the Northeast, the private high schools, the affluent school districts. Those are the ones who tend to apply to 10, 12 colleges, whereas the national average might be 6. We've seen kids apply to 20. We've had a few, which it's kind of nuts, or more. They can afford the application fees, but a lot of colleges are waiving their application fees too, which also increases the amount of applications and makes them more selective because they're getting more people to reject.
Right. Protects their yield. Any predictions about ED?
Ed?
About early decision. Yes, we have noticed a trend of increasing deferrals at the early decision point in favor of, perhaps because the application numbers have increased altogether, and they
for
want
regular.
more time to consider these early decision applicants as against their regular decision population of applications.
Yeah, and it also puts all the pressure on John, a friend of mine, who another guy I play golf with, different course. He said, if I owned a college, I would defer to everybody, because what it does is it puts that psychological pressure on everyone, and makes them more willing to pay whatever it takes, to get in. I think, again, from the cynical standpoint that I've been establishing and reinforcing all night here, I think that's what deferrals do, is they just ratchet up the pressure and the anxiety and the stress. So interestingly, hypocritically, even though colleges are introducing all sorts of mental health crap, they are the ones causing a lot of this.
That's for sure.
It's not, listen, there's a lot of peer pressure, there's a lot of parental pressure, but the colleges themselves are part of this machine, this college industrial complex that places all this stress on people. And early decision is probably the epitome of the stress. It doesn't really help kids, it helps the colleges fill their spots.
Exactly. Question from Linda for me regarding test optional colleges. Am I saying that students are penalized for not submitting scores? I'm not characterizing it that way. However, if you are not submitting scores, I am suggesting that the inference is that your student's score did not meet the minimum range at that school, and therefore the rest of that student's application for admission is going to matter that much more. I'm saying both things. I am saying yes, in many cases, that inference will be had, unless there is another reason. It works both ways. If you haven't submitted scores and there's another reason that the college wants you as an applicant, it softens that requirement for that applicant. I'm just suggesting, if absent that alternative admissions reason that a school is interested in an applicant, that student who doesn't submit scores to a test optional school, where they're not considering them altogether, test blind, then yes, I'm saying that the inference is one that you did not score as well as their minimum. So I guess, am I saying that they're being penalized? Sometimes, a little bit, yes.
Can I take a stab at that one?
Sure.
Because my hat is starting to make my head hurt, so I want to wrap this up. So the question about whether to go test optional or not has many factors, and Pearl just kind of covered most of them. I just want to drill down a little bit. So one of them is, what's the rest of your application look like? If you take out the test scores, that makes everything else more important, just that simple logic. So that means not just your GPA, but also your rigor, how many AP or IB classes you've taken, and your extracurriculars and all that type of stuff. So if your scores are in the middle of the range and you pull that out because your guidance counselor told you to do that, which we've had this happen, literally this case twice this year, that's not going to help you. That's going to hurt your chances. So if you come from a Northeast or more affluent area where it's understood by everyone, including admissions officers, that kids tend to take the SAT 3 or 4 times, or ACT, and have tutoring and classes and all that, that's less likely to be the applicant from that area is less likely to be aided by going test optional, right? Because the test optional policies are really designed to expand access and diversity, right, and give under-resourced kids the right ability to get into colleges that might have turned them down because their scores weren't high enough, because they didn't have tutors and classes and that type of thing. That is the prevailing view in admissions offices. Doesn't necessarily match up with reality, because we were just talking about this. I think that was us the other day. It might be the New York City schools, which are the kids who did the best on the tests were Asian kids from low-income families, and at most of the New York City test schools like Bronx Science and Stuyvesant, whatever, you saw a very high proportion of Asian American kids before they started talking about and removing the tests as a means to get in. And now all of a sudden they kind of rigged things to change the representation of the racial representation, the visual diversity representation of the student body. And the jury's out in terms of whether that's fair or not. But a lot of Asian American kids who scored very highly felt discriminated against, and I see their point.
Yep. Do we have any statistics or insight on whether more students are deferring or taking gap years before applying?
I don't have any stats on it, but I don't think there are. I know that's another one of these things where a lot of people talk about it and then they don't do it. So in the pandemic, I think there was an uptick, but not a huge uptick. It was something like 3% to 5%. 3% in a normal year defer, and I don't have this off the top of my Terman, but that has gone away. There. I don't think there's been a continued increase in gap years.
No, but I will mention another prediction.
Bonus.
Bonus prediction. The college graduate class of 2025, which is one of our daughter's years, is going to have the most competitive job market because they are going to be competing with kids who delayed college by a year. So there's going to be like a double class, similar to what they had to contend with in admissions, but the 2021 high school grads are going to often be coupled with the 2020 grads who delayed, and those kids are all going to be coming out of college in 2025, and that's going to be a very competitive market.
Interesting. Bold.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up. It's been a little over an hour.
Right.
You want to give like one or two more? And then we'll
one
call
or
it a
two
night?
more. Can we send out a replay of this to be determined?
Hold on. Let me check. Let me check with my team. I can't read this. All signs are blurry. I don't know.
Let's see if this is
It will be recorded and made into an episode of our podcast, The College Planning Edge, which is available on Apple, iTunes, Spotify,
okay.
maybe some other places. I don't know.
I'm going to address this last one from Stacy. How is the application cycle for the above 1,500 SAT score non-diverse students who had so many issues last year where they were not admitted at reach schools and they were waitlisted or rejected at target schools, that students with similar credentials in prior years were admitted? What about this year?
That is a question that we get a lot in different words. Mixed at best. It's still early. Once the Supreme Court issues its anticipated decision for the class of 2024 kids, I might have a different answer. This year, I think it's going to continue to be pretty hard for kids who are not special categories. And special category means visually diverse, but could be international students. Those applications are up also from international students. It could mean recruited athletes. That's a big one. It's not as prevalent, but legacy is still a special category. Applying early decision is a special category. But it's really more about the international, the underrepresented minorities, and the athletes, and still legacies, but that's trending down. At most schools. Some schools, it depends on where you're applying, right? So some schools like Notre Dame, I think they take 25% of their kids from legacy families. And I don't think they'll ever stop. I mean, that's my prediction with that one. But we'll see. Anything else?
I got it.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking us possibly seriously with these get-ups. Pearl, do you have any bits of wit and wisdom you want to close with here? I'll give you the final word unless you don't want it.
Just early, get prepared early, and train is, as Andy had said, coming and going, whether you're ready for it or not. One last little on that note, we always recommend that you get for all those current juniors, rising seniors for next year's class. Get all of your application materials, work, essays, recommendations, everything out of the way during the summer, because next fall, I know there's always this misconception, or maybe not anymore, that, 9th through 11th, that's the body of work that you're judged on in college. And by the time you're a senior, you can have senioritis. Actually, there's now an official category. And I don't know if this is only trending recently, but there's an actual category of awaiting the mid-semester, meaning your fall semester transcript grades, the midterm grades. Colleges are waiting for those grades, and perhaps your whole admissions decision is going to turn on whether you did or you didn't perform well in that fall semester of your senior year. So what you don't want to be doing while you're trying to do your best on that last little Hail Mary for your application in doing well in your senior year is you don't also want to be doing your essays to the best of your ability, thoughtfully, et cetera, and so forth, while you're also potentially taking yet another SAT, ACT. Get that out of the way. Get it out of the way early and move on, because there's just like Space Invaders when we were all younger, and as it approaches you, it gets faster and faster and faster. So too the college process.
Right. All that stuff plus your regular schoolwork is
right,
is
and
a
it all
disaster
matters.
waiting to happen.
It all matters.
Yeah. So my prediction is a lot of you will be screaming at your kids all summer, but it can be avoided. So start brainwashing them now, and we're around to help you if you are interested in our help. Either way, thanks for spending the night with us. Yeah. Hope you got some value and some provocative thoughts.
Perhaps some entertainment.
Perhaps some entertainment. We did. And we appreciate you being with us. I know you had other things possibly to do tonight. And if you're on our email list, we will be sending out a replay, assuming we can pull it off. Yeah. And we will be gearing up again for more webinars like this every month. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.